Hello, I'm Kate Kenyon. I am here today to talk to you about content operations. I am currently the content ops lead at Chase in the UK. We're a digital bank launched last September. Okay, so the things I want to talk to you about today are what even is content ops? If you're just curious, this talk is structured into like three parts. The first 5 minutes is really just looking at what content ops is. And then I'm going to look at the second paper for another 5 minutes, which is, well, do I need this? Do I need this yet? And if you've decided at that point that yes, this is definitely something you need, then the last thing I'm going to look at is like how and when would you set up content ops in an operation? Okay, so let's go. What even is content ops? I'll start with a little bit of backstory. I wasn't always in content ops. I was a writer, I was a content strategist, I worked in agencies, in-house. Anywhere and everywhere that I could talk about content, I did. I talked about content strategy, the benefits that you got from it. I made a lot of decks around all the benefit of having content as a business like asset and how to manage it and how to get the most out of content people. And, I did a lot of that. And that's all good stuff. And you should definitely still do that. But I had a client one day who went, yeah, but how? And that was kind of the penny dropping moment for me. If you want a definition of what content ops is, it's yeah, but how? The yeah, and you need both bits, right? The yeah is having a content strategy in the first place, something that you really genuinely want to put into practice, something that you want people to that you want to take from theory into reality. The but how is all of the challenges, obstacles that are going to get in your way to doing that, and working out how do you not only remove them but keep removing them, keep process, keep enhancement, so that your content strategy becomes a repeatable practice. Content operations can cover people, processes, platforms, everything that you need in order to create an environment where good content can happen. To give you a visual example, because maybe yeah, but how is a bit simple. I borrowed stroke stole this from a really great content ops guy. I don't think he considers himself a content ops guy, but I do, called Michael Foley. He wrote this wonderful definition of how content strategy, content design, and content operations come together. Everything that he's sort of graphed under systems design, I would consider as part of content operations, really. I design systems for content people and content itself. If you want to slightly, now there are people who will go, wow, that's a bit simple. Actually, things like content structure, that's a whole different discipline. You could call that content engineering. I'm going to say that those people probably already have content ops, so we don't need to worry about it too much today. In fact, actually, I'm going to simplify it further and say that my definition of content operations for the vast majority of people covers two things: content structure and storage, and then content processes and people as well. Those two things are how to make and manage and structure content to meet your strategy goals, and then how to build the skills and the processes so that the content that you have in mind is actually what gets produced. So there you go. If you came to this talk thinking, I'm not 100% sure what content operations really is, I hope that's given you a really clear understanding of what it's involved. It is, if you like, everything else around the writing, but not the writing itself. At this point, you might decide, wow, you know what, that sounds interesting, but I don't want to do that. I'm a writer, I'm here about craft. The lovely thing about these online talks is that you can bow out right now. You can bow out right now. Go and see Beth Dunn's talk. It's really, really good. You will really enjoy it. If, however, you've decided, that was an interesting 5 minutes, I think I either am doing this already or we definitely need some of that, then hang in with me. So, do I need this yet? And how do I tell? I think there's probably a couple of ways that you can look at this. And I think the best one that I have is actually Well, let me tell you, when I first started writing this talk, I thought to myself, oh, this isn't going to apply to people who are solo practitioners or people who are in teams. I was really kind of struggling for like, where do you start kind of thing? Because normally content operations is about scale. It's about getting repeatable processes that everybody can follow so that things happen more effectively, more quickly at a bigger size. But then I remembered back to when I was first still a writer, and had a real first big failure, which was it wasn't a big failure to them. It was to me. I had content that went out with every single title shortened, truncated with ellipsis down to 15 characters, which is not a lot in the English language. And this came about because I had written all the copy, but because of the way our processes worked, the designer and the developer had just decided that that was a bit long. And actually what they were going to do is just truncate it instead. And they don't look at copy in the same way that I do. For me, a title is the whole story encapsulated. For them, it was just a large font size, and they just cut that thing down because that made more sense to them. And I was really, really annoyed. I took it really quite personally, actually. I felt like disrespected, like nobody understood my craft kind of thing. And actually what it was a lack of process. So even if you are a solo practitioner, I'm afraid the answer I'm going to give you is yes, you do need this. And you have to forgive the stock photography here. That woman's face just made me laugh because she just looks so like sad, like, oh God, this is another thing I need to learn. The one thing I would say is that it is scalable content operations. Even if you are the only writer on your team, you don't have to do all of content operations. You can do bits. You can start small and iterate and learn how to improve operations just for your team alone. And that is still a good and effective use of your time, because that is how you get to the repeated acts of applying content strategy. So yeah, it's you. But if you need a more objective assessment scale, this is one that I've used and I find it really useful. If you look at all of the if you look at how bad is it really, through a number of facets, you can work out how quickly you're going to need content operations. The facets are number of platforms. Is that web, email, app only? What is it? The more every time you double it, you're talking about doubling the work. So if you're already at 2 platforms and you're going to a third, consider yourselves on warning. Volume of changes. Do you put through is your content fairly evergreen, or are you putting through changes once a week, once a fortnight? I work with an app that did 100 releases a week, so like a continuous release process, and content was part of that. And that brings me to also the and this is related to the number of platforms, how many, not just how frequently does it change, but how many changes are you pushing through as well? If you've got a large volume of content, then changing all of it once is going to turn out to be quite a big thing. Number of languages comes into this as well. The more you have, again, double, triple, quadruple, the more you start to need more effective operations. And the final thing is kind of the reverse of this. These are all numbers getting bigger, but what happens if the number of people doesn't change, or your regulation complexity stays the same? I mean, I work in banking. We are really, really tightly regulated. Similarly, pharma, medical, any of those areas. The more people who are involved in making your content, the more you will be challenged if anything else grows. These are the kind of ways of working out whether you need ops. Here's another version of that, which is looking at, and this is done on an individual level. How much time do your writers spend not writing? How much do they spend on non-writing activities? And I've guessed at some here, but based on my own experience, but how much time do they spend copying and pasting things between systems? How much time do they spend doing ad hoc proofreading for people who go, could you just look at these slides for me? How much time do they spend chasing around after product detail that they need before they can do the writing? These are the kind of measures that make you understand how much time you're already losing without an ops person there. My rule of thumb is that if you did all these diagrams and then you lay them on top of each other, If you found that your people were using 25% or more of their time, then I would strongly suggest that your next hire at least has 50% of their time dedicated towards doing this work, if not 100% of their time. I think similarly, if you are looking at job ads and you're seeing one that says, "Oh, we'd love you to come in and be our lead content writer and also define all these processes," big red flag time, big red flag, because you will not get to do any writing. You will spend a lot of time working out other people's processes for them. So I hope that gives you an idea around, do I need this yet? The answer is yes, you do. You may not need all of it. However, if you assess everything and then go, that's quite a lot of time we're losing, then the answer is sooner rather than later. Okay, so at this point, if you're not too freaked out, how and when do I set this up? An approach. I'm going to give you some stories from working in my current role in Chase, and hopefully it will give you some ideas about a process that you can use at home, in your own work at home. I mean, eventually we will leave the house, right? But not yet. Anyway, how do we set this up? So, I would like to start this by saying, if you are a manager or you have the word ops in your title, you are at a distinct advantage to anybody who doesn't. You have conferred authority to make operational changes. So your approach might be slightly different. If you are in this role, if you are lucky enough to be in this position, then I would start by mapping the areas where content issues and business issues actually intersect the most. I mean, I've done here as a scatter graph chart, but finding areas where the big overlap is, those are the easy areas. This top right corner that I've got here, that is the easiest space to operate in, because the needs of your team and the needs of the business are highly aligned. It's very easy for you to get buy-in. It's very easy to make changes. More challenging spaces will be ones where you have got more urgency in your teams, but everybody else is like, take a ticket and get in line. Those are not the spaces to start with. When you are starting content operations, start with easy. If you can get something which is easy and brings benefit to everybody, so much the better. However, most people don't have content ops in their names. Most people are starting from a position of being a player manager, or even just, still being somebody who's really doing this side of desk as part of another job they're supposed to be doing. In this case, I would start smaller. I would start with the team that you already work with. You have conferred authority within that team already. People know you. People know you. People like you. You're dedicated to your work. Otherwise, you simply wouldn't be at this conference. So you already have a space to start there. And I would start by take a period of time, like a sprint or a fortnight, a month, and pick up where the issues show up in your practice. Is it missing information, lack of problem statements? The handover with developers is really sticky. Is it compliance? Where are the issues showing up? And then you will know where to start when it comes to finding the opportunities. I mean, I talk about how and when, but actually it's how is the thing I'm going to come to last, but when is where it's most obvious, and definitely start now. So, a process. This is my process, and it's one that came up within the team that I work in Chase, and we use it as much as we can. It is used not just by ops people, but anybody who really needs to make a change. When I first started in Chase 2 years ago, we didn't have an ops team. I didn't come in as an ops leader. I came in to do content production. I came in because I'm a dab hand with a CMS and I know how to make them work. What happened was that you need an awful lot around that in order to make that work. And this is the process that we came up with. It's called Start, Stop, Switch, Sing. And I will explain what I mean by that. Start. Start by designing the future. Draw out those current states, where it hurts, where it sucks. Plan out that new state. I mean, I like swim lane diagrams. You may like post-it notes. It doesn't matter. As long as you understand where you are and where you want to go to. I would say that this is not the work. This is not the thing that you're going to show the people that you work with. This is your research. Nobody wants to see the messing working out, by the way. Please never show these diagrams to anybody. They are your own backup, so that if anybody ever says, yeah, but how did you work this out? You can go, this is my work, okay? So start by designing the future. And here is an example of what that looks like when you've done that work. This is a piece of work that was done by a brilliant colleague of mine who was also not a content ops person. She was a writer, called Danielle Battleson Porterfield. She's excellent. Please don't hire her because I love working with her. Anyway, she designed something called Cadence for the Future because she had a problem whereby in her teams, she was being briefed too late with a designer, and there wasn't enough time for them to do effective research, to do design, to do content before the developer was like, are you ready yet? Can we do this now? So what you're seeing here is a way of defining out who does what and when. It sounds really simple, but it's actually really useful when you need people to stop doing one behavior and start doing another. This was saying to product owners, right, you need to do your product exploration in this sprint, 118, and then definitions in 119. We will do UX and content in 120. You will get your final product in 121, and you're ready for dev in 122. That gives us 4 sprints. That's how long it takes to get to the point where you are not wasting developers' time. She aligned it like this because although it was a content problem, the position within the company was that we need to have developers at full speed at all times. So she aligned it with an existing problem in the company. And then once you've done something like that, you need to schedule the stop. You need to actually say to people, okay, this is our new way of working. We're going to start it in 2 weeks, a month. You need to give people time to finish what they've already got in flight and then tell people it's going to happen. Block it out in their calendars. Make that thing happen. Don't let them back out because you will always be busy. There will always be something. And until you change these ways of working, it will always be you that's carrying the can for the lack of process. And bear in mind that it is not a personal thing. When you start doing this, it can feel like, you know what, I'm going to change things. People don't respect me. I'm going to going to prove the value of content. No. Right. Most of this happened before you arrived anyway. And if it didn't, it's just a lack of process. It's a vacuum of process that starts these things. People start with good intentions. And actually, you are a content expert here. You are the best person to redesign this process. And hey, you're here. You're going to do this now. So stop. But your responsibilities don't end there. Switch is the hardest piece of all content ops work. It is the grunt work. It is getting people. I think of it as the gap between the 2 trapezes. You know when you see people like on a trip, like 2 trapezes in a circus, and they let go of one and they grab another? That's what you're doing. You are encouraging people to let go of the old way of doing things and grab onto the new way of doing things. And if the gap between them is too big, they will either hang on for dear life or they will fall. And you need to make sure that doesn't happen. Most content operation changes, in fact, all business change really that fails comes because of that gap. So how do we fix that gap? Danielle and her team, they fixed it by working together on a daily basis. If you're doing things at scale, I like run books, which is like literally day 1, somebody does this, day 2, you do that, day 3, we do that. And you're really, really hand-holding people through this process of changing the way they did things. But the final thing is sing it out. The final thing is once you have got it and you know it works, the part of Switch is also that you get a chance to test things, and that's really useful because you may not get it right first time. That's fine. The whole point of testing. But once you do have an outcome, tell everyone about it. Write that thing up, present it, do it more than once, get your boss to co-sign on it. If it was successful, they will have no problems co-signing it on the bottom because it makes them look good. Sell the outcome, not the process. Again, nobody wants to see your workings out. They just want to know how they make things better. This is something that takes content up to another level as well. We're not just writers, we're people who work out how stuff works. You are using skills you already have and applying them to something slightly different. Within Chase, these are some places where I have reapplied this strategy. So you can use it for processes, people, and systems. For our systems, I manage how and where our CMS is used, what goes in it, how the stuff that's in it is managed, when and how people have to do content reviews. I'm directing strategy that says when something gets within a month of needing its content review date, the person who owns that content gets an automatic Jira bug ticket. Little bit evil? Yes, it is. Is my content out of date? No, it isn't. I've also defined roles for content people as well. So not just like progression, like how do I get better at my job? How do I progress within the company? But also, where does my role start and stop? The person, without that kind of governance, the person who last touched the content is the owner of it. And that's not strictly true. By setting up clear boundaries that we are the midwives, not the mothers of content, we will help you birth this thing, but content owner, usually in this case a product owner, you take that thing home, you raise it, and when it comes to review, you're the person who's going to tell me whether it's still accurate or not. Having all of this information and having these ways of working mean that we are able to manage a very large number of platforms with web, email, push notifications, big app, SMS, you name it, multiple channels with a very small team. And that comes about because of content operations. Ever since I started doing this, as I say, when I came in, content ops was not in my title. And as I did more than this, my boss said, oh, you've taken on a bit more, should we? And gave me a bit more work to do. And I said, no, I'm going to change my title to content ops. I want the badge. And the badge is important because it recognises that the work is not something that's done side of desk. It is something that has to happen if you're going to scale. So in summary, you don't need the badge to get started doing content ops. You can start where you are. The chances are you do need to start, even if it's just within your own teams. But it does help if you do have the badge. If you start doing this work on a regular basis, start asking for the badge or start asking for someone else to scale this up for you, because without it, you will never see the kind of returns on your strategy that you were hoping for. And people will go, oh, it wasn't a very good strategy. No, it was probably a great strategy, but without operational power behind it, you're never going to get it delivered. And that is probably my final point, is to remember that ops is not a kind of nice to have. It is the thing that helps you get to having your strategy happen. It is the yeah and the but how that means that you get to the end goal, and try to keep both in mind. Okay, that's everything I have for you today. If you want to ask me questions, if you're interested, let's talk. LinkedIn, hit me up. Any questions, I'm going to be here for the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.